Hi, welcome to day 13 of our 31-day journey through the book of Proverbs. Today we're going to look at Proverbs 13. When I first read this chapter, I read it a couple of times. There's one verse that really sticks out to me because I'm familiar with it, verse 24, which is a verse that abusers will use to justify extreme punishment on children. So I want to talk about parenting just in general, and it won't be much just in this time uh, frame that we have and in this setting, but I do. So if you're a parent, I'm asking you to hang on for a few minutes because I want to talk to you. But I want to go through what I noticed in this proverb. What spoke to me was a bunch of warnings. So I just want to work through the warnings that I saw, and I'm hoping that you saw some of these and they resonated with you. The first one was verse 3. It in verse 3, the writer of Proverbs says, "Opening your mouth can ruin everything." Right? And I read that and I'm like, I I've done this, right? This was written for me. I literally wrote in my notes, is this only me? I have to assume that there's more of us that have been around for a long time. Hence, the writer of Proverbs wrote this a very, very, very long time ago that we can, with our mouths, disrupt a situation. We can upset a party, a picnic, a good family night, a date. So we talked about yesterday about the effects of our mouth, our words. So that one struck me today. Verse 5, the wicked cause shame and disgrace. Verse 6, the evil are misled by sin, which I think is interesting because when I read that, it made me think, okay, well, the evil people are being led. They know they're being led. They don't know they're being misled. Sin is misleading. Sin is promising something that it can't deliver. It's always a lie. And evil people are being misled. They're being led to a place that they probably didn't want to be in. So they're misled. Verse 9, the light of the wicked will be snuffed out. The light of the wicked will be snuffed, like blown out like a candle. This gives hope to us that are believers, followers of Jesus, that someday good will be restored. Jesus will return, put everything back in order, right? And the wicked will be snuffed out. Verse 10, pride leads to conflict. Right? How can it not lead to conflict? If we're in a situation that's together and I think that I'm more important than you, this is going to create conflict. If you feel like you're more important than everybody or me or whoever's in that setting, right? It's going to create conflict. Pride leads to conflict. That's what it does. People who despise advice are asking for trouble. And then in verse 18, it's kind of the similar thought. The writer says, if you ignore criticism, you will end in poverty and disgrace. Now, I understand that there's a technique to offering criticism well, and we're just not coming off as judgmental and condescending, and as a parent to somebody, we don't have the right to parent. But this idea of we need to be open to advice from other people, and that we can't ignore criticism. It's easy just to put the walls up and block it out. Verse 20, associate with fools and get in trouble, right? I heard this so many times from my parents growing up because of my friend group, right? You associate with fools, you're going to get in trouble. I don't know if they knew they were quoting scripture or not, or they just told me all my friends were trouble and I'm a fool for hanging out with them, but I lived that verse. And then we get to these two verses about parenting. Um, Verse 1 says, a wise child accepts a parent's discipline. Now, I don't know a lot of wise children. I was not a wise child. Some would argue I'm not a wise adult either, but that's for another time. Um, but a lot of times children don't see the value in their parents' correction and discipline until they're much older. Until we can look back and go, now I see it. Right? God's done some things in my life. I'm more mature. I see why my parents did what they did. Right? So a wise child accepts a parent's discipline. But verse 24 is the verse that I think can be very dangerous. And it says, those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children, which people who participate in and endorse not capital, corporal punishment with your child, right? Physical punishment, spanking, whatever you want to call it, will use this verse to justify extreme abusive physical abuse to a child. Those who love their child, the second half says, care enough to discipline them. So they believe that if this is because they love their child, and it's not discipline, it's abuse. So where do we fall on this, with raising a child and discipline in general? I think the interesting thing for me with discipline is we would all define it differently. If you ask me what discipline is, I'll give you my definition. When we're talking about in a parenting child relationship, if I asked you, you would tell me probably maybe something similar, maybe not similar, but you would have your definition of discipline. And it's going to go back to our experiences as children, to the way we were disciplined. And then the corrective, maybe we would call corrective, the corrective things we will do if we're a parent now with children about how we discipline our children. So we take what we've experienced, and then we process that, hopefully, and then we discipline our children in some way. But this is a definition that we would probably all write a little bit different about what discipline is. We see it different. We've experienced it differently. And whether or not you believe in, endorse, corporal punishment, that's a topic for another time. What I think is important from this verse is that if we're going to love our children, we're going to discipline them. We're going to discipline them. We're going to see that they need to be corrected. That if we're going to try to raise small children to be adults who know, love, and serve Jesus, it will be very intentional in the way we raise our kids. There will be correction that happens. Now, how it happens, is something you need to settle, for yourself. And children, as we know, if you have more than one child, or if you are in a family where you had, siblings, that disciplining children is very different, even within the same family, because children respond differently to different things, right? I was a problem child, right? I was just defiant. I struggled with authority. Some would say I still do. But I would weigh in my mind the punishment of something versus whether I do it or not. And I would break rules knowing that it's worth it to me if I get caught to take the punishment for this. And then, I have siblings who, just a finger point, a stare, right? They're corrected. Some of us, a little harder to harness, rein them in. But we know that it's got to be very intentional. That parenting is, a very active practice. It's a lifestyle. If we do it right, if we see that God has entrusted with us the life or lives of another human being, this is the greatest ministry we will ever have. I don't know if all parents understand that raising kids is doing God's work, but why would He trust us with a life that depends wholly on us, right? We go home from the hospital like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I have a child, a life that cannot live very long apart from the care that I can provide for them. And I think He's painting this picture for us, this parent-child relationship, so that we could see how much He loves us, how much He cares for us, how much we depend on Him, how much He provides for us. But His intention, I think, and I believe this, with giving us kids, is that we would produce adults who know, love, and serve Jesus, or at least point them in that direction, right? As a child gets older, becomes an adult, they're going to make their own decisions. But our job as parents is to create that environment that they see Jesus in us, and they're attracted to Him because of it. So the handoff then with our adult children isn't to the world, but to Jesus. And it's very natural because they've already seen and witnessed and experienced Jesus through us as parents. So I tried to, I say that any success we had with our boys comes from my wife, right? I have more failures than successes. But parenting, we knew, was going to be hands-on, and it was going to be very intentional. And some of this that I'm sharing with you is not original. I don't know where it came from for me, but these are just things that I just want to hopefully will help you a little bit with parenting yourself. I would say this: never discipline out of anger. Never correct a child from an emotional place. When a child disappoints, breaks rules, does wrong, and the blood pressure rises, the adrenaline flaps open, and that is not the time probably to correct a child. They're going to see our emotion and our reaction. And if it's going to be a time of teaching and correction, then it needs to be in a calmer situation and scenario. So never discipline out of anger. This really can create situations that can be devastating um, with a child. Expectations must be clear. So the rules that we have with our children, and they change or obviously over time as children grow and become more mature, the expectation should be crystal clear. This is what we're expecting of you as our child from your parents who love you, care for you. This is what the expectation is. And here's the consequence when you don't meet the expectation. Surprising kids with discipline and correction when they didn't know that what they were doing was wrong is probably not the best way to do it. But to lay out the framework, allowing kids some wiggle room to make some decisions as they mature, giving them responsibility, and then when they do wrong, when they fail with the responsibility again, we can take the responsibility back, right? This is how we teach them. And then give it to them again when they've earned it back, right? And then we raise them this way. We teach them that they can make decisions and choices, but there's consequences to them. And we need to be consistent. I don't think there's anything, as devastating, I think, with a parenting relationship when we're just all over the board with rules today aren't the same, or this is okay here, but not okay there. And, this type of language, okay, well, he's with them, or they do this with grandma and grandpa, but they don't do that. We don't do that in our house, but they can. That type of stuff just makes it even harder. Consistency. These are the expectations. These are the consequences for missing them. I also think that, something that really resonated with me, and I'm not sure where I got it, was to raise our kids to fear disappointment, not discipline. It's much different when you get down on your knees and you look a child in the eyes after he's done something you've told him, this is the rule that, you can't break this. You can't do this. With a small child, even with an older child, and you look him in the eyes and you say, you know what? I asked you not to do that, or I asked you to do this and you didn't do it. You're making my heart hurt. It makes me sad inside when I ask you to do something and you don't do it, or I ask you to not do something and you do it. See, when you ask me for things, I try to do them for you because I love you and I care about you and I want you to be happy and I want, there to be joy between us. But you're not doing that for me. Right? There's a big difference between raising a child to fear disappointment with his parents as opposed to fearing the discipline that's going to come. Much different. It's much different. So I would encourage you to teach your children that what they do when they disobey hurts you, and disappoints you, and they will learn as they mature that letting you down is going to be more painful to them oftentimes than any physical punishment, if that's what you choose to do, or any other punishment, taking things away, grounding them, phones, whatever, taking stuff, restricting activities, right? Disappointment can be key if we teach our kids to fear disappointment. And I think we got to show them mercy and grace, right? This is how we get them to see Jesus in us. This is when we say, you know what? I'm going to give you a second chance. I'm going to give you a third chance. I'm going to give you a fourth chance. Right? Mercy and grace. Showing them the love of God shown to us through Jesus that we've experienced as adults. Showing them what we've received, giving it to our kids. And then pointing it to them. Explain it. You deserve this, but I'm not going to do it this time. Now, I understand I just talked about consistency. This has to be teaching times, different situations, different scenarios. You're going to have some flexibility, I think, to do these things. Other times you're not. But if we can show our children mercy and grace through the love of Jesus and tell them why and how we can do this, it's because of him, then they get to see Jesus in us. So I know this video went longer than normal. I wish we could talk more about this because I just think parenting is the greatest ministry many of us will be entrusted with. And it breaks my heart to see parents who are just lazy, who just let kids raise themselves because it doesn't produce adults oftentimes that they're proud of. So parenting is the hardest work we'll ever do, but it's God's work. I hope this finds you well, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow for Proverbs 14.